Okay, welcome everyone to this. I guess it's probably we're getting close to the end of Judges, and we're going to be doing chapters 17 and 18, and that will get that's those two chapters alone are a story in themselves. And so let's go ahead and begin with the blessing. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher kiddushanu b'mitzvotav v'tzivanu lasok b'divrei Torah. Blessed are you, Lord our God, King of the universe, who sanctifies us with his commands and commands us to engross ourselves in words of Torah. Okay. So tonight we are 1st of December. It's amazing how fast this year has flown by. And I've discovered that somebody told me that, once you're over the hill, time goes faster. And maybe that's the case. So, okay, here's our timeline, and you'll see in our timeline we don't even have the guys that are in this time period today, or in this story today. They're not even in this timeline, but it happens right in here someplace. This time frame, possibly around 1100, because there's it's a story that takes place during the time of the judges. However, we'll see that there's not even any judges announced or talked about in this thing. But what it does, it gives us a picture of Israel at the time and kind of the religious chaos that was going on there. And so anyway, let's go ahead and let's see. There's a phrase that okay. Now here's a chart, a map that was left over from last week, but this shows some people that we're going to be talking about this week, and that's Dan, the people of Dan. All right, and they're come from this area right in here. All right, so the structure of these two, the rest of the book of Judges is that happens for the rest of the chapter of the rest of the book, you start out with this A and a B, and then it starts backing it down to the B and the A. So you've got a structure that you're having a theme or a series of thoughts, and then it gets to the middle, sometimes to the major thought, and then it starts backing back, and you have parallel thoughts and sentences until you get back to the beginning of it. And you'll see this is a very simple one. In those days, there was no king in Israel. Every man did what was right in his own eyes. Then B, in those days, there was no king in Israel. Then B prime, now in those days, there was no king in Israel. Notice that every man did what was right in his own eyes doesn't show up. And so until you get back down to chapter 21 and verse 25, in those days there was no king in Israel. Every man did what was right in his own eyes. So those were okay, it's kind of crazy around here. My wife just kind of crawled back behind me so that she could go get the dog to quit barking, and oh boy. And you'll see that the A and A prime are actually the same sentence, basically the same sentence, and B and B prime are the same sentence. So within that, then you have the story, various stories that still carry on this theme. And what is that? That there was no king in Israel. It's almost as if the writer is trying to make the case for a for having a king in Israel. You know, everything is chaos. Everybody's doing what they want to, and their own, and you know, it's all right in their own eyes. You remember back when Samson saw the woman in Timnah, and he says, you know, she was a Canaanite woman, but said that she looked right in his eyes, you know, and or that was the one. She seemed to be the correct one in his own eyes, and so and that's kind of what we're seeing here in the rest of Judges, is that everybody kind of does what their own thing. In one way, it's chaotic, and there's no structure, and then the other way, it's what a lot of people desire today, was that for the government and everything else to leave them alone. Well, there was no government then. I mean, they just it was whoever the strong man was in the village, or the city state, or whatever. That was the only government that they had, and there was no national government, and the centralized temple worship had not been set up yet at this point in Israel's history. So it literally was everybody that whoever thought about you know, whatever they wanted to do, that's what they did. And if you were strong enough to pull it off, okay, well, there you go. But if you weren't, then you know, then you better be fast on your feet. So now we're going to start out with the talking about the hill country of Ephraim, and I just wanted to kind of show you where it is that we're talking about here. And this outline here that we've got, that is the territory of Ephraim. And so the hill country of Ephraim would be just, you know, anything right in here in this area that I'm pointing out. There's, you know, the Central Ridge Road. There was a road right along there. And we don't really know where this guy Micah in our story lived, but it just said in the central highlands of Ephraim. So he lived in the hill country. And so let's go ahead and then you can see that, okay, this is the Jordan River. Jerusalem is way down here at the bottom. And so that kind of gives you an idea of where this was, not very far north of Jerusalem. Now there was a man in the hill country of Ephraim whose name was Micah, and he said to his mother, you know, that the 1,100 pieces of silver that were taken from you, and which you uttered a curse, and which you also repeated in my ears, behold, the silver is with me. I took it. And then the mother said, well, blessed be my son of Adonai. And he returned the 1,100 pieces of silver to his mother. And his mother said, I wholly dedicate the silver from my hand to Adonai for my son to make a graven image and a molten image. Now, therefore, I will return it to you. Okay, there's just a lot of weirdness in this. A lot of weirdness. Because I can imagine if I'd stolen 1,100 pieces of silver or shekels, whatever the stuff was, and if you say that these are the same kind of silver that, say, we'd read about in the Samson and Delilah story. Okay, what did we say? That 5,500 pieces of silver that she got was about, you know, $14 million or something in our today's world. And so that would make each piece of silver $2,400, 24 to 2,500, something like that, $2,450, I think. But and it's kind of all over the place, because trying to assign a value to this, it just depends on which PH deity that you're talking about, and which you know, what they say is deal. And some of it said, "Oh, well, that was almost nothing," and then other people said, "Oh no, that was a small fortune," or whatever. We don't know, but 1,100 pieces of silver. Okay, if I had 1,100 silver dollars, that would be worth a good bit of coin. And and I know that if I had taken that from my mother, unbeknownst to her, and she had been fretting around it and issued a curse on whoever took that stuff, and then repeated it to me back and forth over the, however many days, weeks, months, about whoever took that money, just, uh, talking bad about them and all that kind of stuff. And this whole time, Micah's sitting there. Oh boy, when do I tell her? What do I tell her? Okay, how do I do this? So finally, something happened, and he says, "Hey, Ma, that that $1,100 that you lost, well, I'm the one that took it." So, okay, now this must have been a remarkable mother, because she just turned right around and said, "Oh, bless you, son. Blessed be the son, my son of Adonai." I don't think that would have happened in with my growing up and my mother. She would have certainly spoken to me a little bit more sternly than that. That's all I can say about that. And so he turned the 1,100 pieces of silver over to his mother, and now in the Hebrew, there is a little bit of a problem here, in that it says, "I wholly dedicate the silver from my hand," or "I had already dedicated the silver from my hand to Adonai." It's it can actually be read both ways, and I've seen it translated every which way from Sunday on that particular verse, that I had already dedicated it, I will dedicate it, I have dedicated, I am dedicating it, whatever, however the tenses go from past perfect, to past tense, pluperfect, and all those things that I never learned in school, but people keep beating me up over now that I'm using Hebrew all the time. So it and even the scholars, they disagree over what that really meant, at what time frame that was. But the part of it that gets me is the part that I look at this and said, okay, I'm going to dedicate this money, or a portion of this money, or whatever, to Adonai, so and give it to my son for as a graven image. We're going to make this little idol out of molten silver, and I'm going to give it to my son so that he can have it in his little shrine room, wherever that was. All right, so that's just a real problem, that she was going to be dedicating this silver to God, but in the form of an icon or an idol, or something like that, or a little g god. And so maybe you can kind of figure that one out on yourselves, what I'm talking about there, because the Bible definitely says, don't make any graven images of anything in heaven or earth, and certainly don't set up an idol that represents God, because that was a big no-no. But that's what they did. There again, every man did what was right in his own eyes. All right, so when anybody got a comment or question on that particular one, okay, you know the drill. Just unmute yourself anytime. You don't even have to wait for me to say that. Just interrupt me and jump in there if you want to. All right. So going ahead. So when he returned the silver to his mother took 200 pieces of silver and gave them to the silversmith, who made it into a graven image and a molten image, and they were kept in the house of Micah. Now the man Micah had a shrine of gods, and he made an ephod and household items, and consecrated one of his sons to become his priest. And so again, here, what does it say? In those days there was no king in Israel, and every man did what was right in his own eyes. So this is again this conflict of what the Torah says and then what the people are actually doing. It was very, very real. And she blesses Micah in the name of Adonai. Says you're blessed of Adonai, but the 200 pieces of silver, depending on what how much you wanted to assign to the weight of silver and how big these were, whether they were a lot, a heavy shekel or a little shekel or whatever it was. It could be over $500,000 that she had decided to make into this idol, and that's a pretty substantial amount. And this is in today's world I'm talking about. So that could be anywhere from 5 to 10 years worth of work paychecks for somebody. I think I read somewhere where the I can't remember if it was the average age or median age, or average wage or the median wage, or some other thing that statisticians will use, was around $50,000 a year. I would have thought that it was much lower than that, but if it was $50,000 a year, okay, there's 10,000 or 10 years worth of salary right there that the lady put into this idol. And I state again the contradiction there, that the Bible says that you should make no graven images, nothing, molten images, no any kind of images at all that would be portraying God. And and here they are making this great big one. So not only that, but then they went and they made up a shrine. He had a shrine room. He made up an ephod, and I think that the household, they had household gods and all sorts of little ones. All right, so here I did make a picture of that. This, in case you didn't know what an ephod was, okay, that's this breastplate right here. And some people say, well, the ephod is also this front piece of cloth, but a lot of it would be just this thing here. And then when they talk about the household gods, well, these are the little things here that they could carry around with them, either by hand or in a pouch or something like that. And I don't know if any of you remember, and I've talked about it before, the household gods, where in the movie The Gladiator, and this gladiator that looked and acted and sounded like a Russell Crowe, he would hold his little doll things there when he was thinking about his family. He carried those little figurines that it had Mama and the children on down, whatever. And so he would look at them, and that's how he would kind of remember. And but a lot of people had those kind of little figurines because it was their God. It represented their God, and it was in their hand, something that they could hold, and it was tangible. And so, but these are actual, the ones that I've shown here, these are actual little idols or little statuettes, whatever you want to call those, that were found in Israel. Okay, so these were the ones that they actually were, in the land of Israel, however many years ago it was, and that's where they're calling them teraphim. And if you read, depending on the translations, you'll see that word teraphim in the explanations or in the actual scripture. So, all right, any comments or questions so far? Because we're fixing to jump the story just a little bit and go back to something else, or a new part of the adventure here. Any comments or questions? All righty then. And I had mentioned before where it keeps talking about there was no king in Israel. Everyone did what was right in his own eyes. It keeps playing up this idea of the chaos that's going on in Israel right now. And so it's almost like the justification. Yeah, we got our king because we really needed a king because everything in our whole world was all in chaos, and everybody was, just making up their rules as they went along, and playing games with people who make up the rules as they go along is really, really fast. It's aggravating, and it would be even more so if it was the game of life, and people were always making up their own rules that to get them to where they could win all the time. We have the opportunity to play games with, let's just say, some little ones, and this little one then can make up the games or make up the rules of the game as she goes along, so that she has a better chance of winning. Well, that's kind of what the life was like in Israel in those days, where everybody did what they wanted to do, and you better be just fast on your feet and thinking fast on your feet, because it was a tough time in Israel. All right. Now there was a young man from Bethlehem of Judea.
He made it the hard way, huh?
Yeah, that's the way that you had. That's just the way life was in those days. Okay. Now there was a young man from Bethlehem of Judah, Bethlehem of Judah, of the clan of Judah, who was a Levite, and he sojourned there. When the man departed from the town from Bethlehem of Judah to sojourn wherever he could find a place, and as he journeyed, he arrived in the hill country of Ephraim to the house of Micah. And Micah said to him, "Where do you come from?" And he replied, "I'm a Levite from Bethlehem of Judah, and I am traveling to stay wherever I may find a place." All right, so this guy, at this point in the narrative, we don't know who he is. There may very well be a conflict here, a contradiction, because it said here he was a Levite, but then before that it says he was a young man from Bethlehem of Judah, of the clan of Judah. So they go from Bethlehem of Judah, a city-state or a city of Judah, then down to, and that's the whole family of Judah. Then it goes down and says, well, of the clan of Judah. So that word clan is, I think it's a lesser word, less powerful word than, say, of the tribe of Judah or of the nation of Judah or whatever. But clan is a little bit lower down the scale. And he said, who was a Levite. Now, how can you be of the tribe of Judah and also be a Levite at the same time? I guess there are ways that you can do that, say that. But what I look at it is that it's just the way that this is written. what happened is that here is a Levite born of a Levitical family. But remember, Levites were scattered around all over Israel because they taught Torah. They were the judges between the people, and so here he was in Bethlehem, and maybe what happened is that he just bailed out of Bethlehem because, okay, everybody already had him a Torah teacher and a Torah counselor, and all right, I need to keep looking around here, and so that's it says he sojourned there, meaning that he didn't put down any roots there. He was just kind of traveling through, and he wasn't born there in Bethlehem. He was just traveling through. And then, he went from Bethlehem and just wherever that he could find a place where he, could somehow earn a living. And that's what it was. He was just going along trying to earn a living. And it's kind of hard to go around places and try to make a living doing things like preaching the gospel. It's hard. Well, I say hard to make a living. It seems like there's a few people that get out there and can make millions and millions from it. So, I mean, it's I don't have that skill set. Hadn't figured that one out yet. And so, and I'm not really trying to. And so he left Bethlehem, I'm sure, for financial opportunities elsewhere because he just wasn't cutting it there. And so, plus he was young, maybe he could travel and see the sights. But it also shows us he didn't have a plan. He didn't have a clue where he was going, what he was doing. He said, I'm just going to sojourn until I find some place that I can crash. And get me a house someplace, or a place, an apartment, any kind of a thing. He didn't have a plan, so he wandered around from Bethlehem, up the road to Jerusalem, stayed there a while probably, and then went on up the road, and he ended up at this, house of Micah. Now Micah was a very wealthy guy, it seems like, because here he had a place, a house with a shrine in it. And so, and later on we see that the people of Dan were outside the gates of his compound, I guess you would say. So, at any rate, he got up there, he got to, up in the center, in the hill country of Ephraim, and, met up with this guy named Micah, and Micah was just quite taken by the young man. All right, it says, so Micah said to him, stay with me and be a father and a priest to me, and I will give you 10 pieces of silver a year, a suit of apparel, and your provision. So the Levite went in, and the Levite was content to stay with the man, and the young man became to him as one of his sons. So Micah consecrated the Levite, and the young man became his priest and lived in the house of Micah. Then Micah said, now I know that Adonai will do me good, seeing I have a Levite as my priest. Whoa! So, 10 pieces of silver. Now, how much was that? Well, it depends on which one of the internet deity, internet PH deities that you see out there, and what they say. Some people said, well, yeah, it could be, living $50,000 a year, something like, or $25,000 a year, which I guess that would keep you from starving, but it certainly wouldn't let you thrive if you were talking about today's dollars. Other people said, well, that 10 pieces of silver was not a living wage. Okay, so the social justice warriors of today would have been on his side, that you need to pay this guy a minimum wages of whatever might be at the time. But they also provide the room and board for the guy. So he had he had a flop and 3 hots every day, or maybe not, because I think back in those days they only ate once a day. But anyway, he had a place that he could sleep and stay and be safe, and then also a place to eat. And not only that, to top it all off, he got a set of garments. Now, I don't know, it doesn't say in this contract here whether that was an annual stipend or what, but said he got a set of garments. Now, were these priestly garments that he had that would have been much more expensive? And so that's why it's included in the bargaining details. We just don't know. It doesn't tell us. So, but it does say that Micah took him and consecrated him. Now, anybody got an idea what it means to be consecrated? Any ideas? I mean, you got an idea?
Set apart.
There you go. That's the words I got. Of course, you're reading my notes. Good for you, Joseph.
You know what?
Okay, yeah, it's set apart. It's something that you are separated out. You're designated as this or whatever. So he set Micah apart. Now, the problem with that is, hadn't Micah already said, "Hey, you, my son, come over here. I'm going to make you the priest," and so forth. And so now all of a sudden, here comes this guy from Bethlehem, and the father is so taken with him that he says, wait a minute. Okay, I want you to be the priest. I want you to be my father. And then we see later on the language says, and Micah was also a father to the Levite. So it was a kind of a funny relationship in a way. And so that's, Micah kind of considered his priest as a as a kind of a good luck charm. And this is just kind of a funny way of looking at it, I guess. Funny that he could be the father and the son at the same time. All right. So in those days, there was no king in Israel. Okay, there again, you've got that chiasm there. But what does it say? It says there was no king in Israel. Okay, I'm still waiting for the other part of the sentence that says, and every man did what was right in his own eyes. Well, it's not there. Okay, so that's kind of the structure of the chiasm. And it says in those days there was no king in Israel. And in those days, the tribe of Dan was seeking an inheritance for itself to settle down in Jerusalem, Jerusalem. And so that's where, here we got this sentence, there was no king in Israel. Boom. And in those days, the tribe of Dan was seeking an inheritance for itself to settle in. And to that day, no territory had fallen to them for an inheritance in the midst of the tribes of Israel. So Dan had been in the land here, from at least 200 years. Let's go back and look at that. Well, no, that's the wrong slide bunch there. Here, jump back over here. Okay. So here they were somewhere around 1150, let's say, to 1150 or 1100. So what that meant is that there is 300 or 3,500 year difference between where they were in this Judges timeline and where we started out after the conquest of Canaan and Joshua dies. Okay, so that means you got 200, 250 years, something like that difference. And between the beginning of it and the end. And so in that time frame, Dan had never really conquered anything. It said no territory had fallen to Dan. Now maybe it's because they were small, but maybe it's just because they weren't fighting any battles. Who knows? It just says that that's the way it was. And so for 250 years, they'd been in that slump, I guess you'd say. And so going ahead there, they said that there was so the children of Dan sent 5 men from their clan out of their entire population, men of valor from Zorah and Eshtaol, to spy out the land and explore it. And he said to them, "Go explore the land." When they came to the hill country of Ephraim, to the house of Micah, they lodged there. Okay, I'm just wondering, how in the world did they figure that out? How did they figure out what, where, and what, and all that kind of stuff? That that they, I don't know. Where are they going to go? What are they going to do? And so they just sent these spies out, and they go up from Zorah to Eshtaol, and they explore around. And because remember, they're in the middle of Israel. There's Benjamin down here. Okay, look at where's my map? Okay, there's Benjamin down here, and Manasseh up here, and Ephraim here, and then of course there's little Dan right down in this little part right in here. So where are they going to go? What are they going to do? So they send these guys out, and they explore. They come along this road right here on the Central Ridge Road, and they get up. They see this guy Micah in this area in the Central Highlands here. Okay. And at that point, then they stick around with him for a little bit, and they okay, my screen just okay, there it goes. And so and this is the same kind of deal with this Micah guy. Here he is. He's going out. He's leaving Bethlehem, and he says, "Okay, I'm going to go someplace. I have no idea where." So he just kind of rambles around, goes someplace. And so then he gets up there to the north part, and he runs into Micah. And he said, "Okay, where did you come from? Who are you, and where did you come from?" He says, "Okay, I'm a Levite from Bethlehem of Judah, and I'm traveling and just staying wherever I can." And so it's just one of those kind of a deals that he says, "Stay with me. I want you to stay with me." And so who knows what happened to the son. And then here Micah says, "And I know this is going to be great for me. I've got a good luck charm. I've got me a priest." And so he gave him the 10 pieces of silver, room and board, garments, and he set him apart. And so then Dan, they're looking for someplace. Everybody's looking for someplace. So they went up to started up to the north, because that's the only place left for them. You go to the west, and you still got those nasty old Philistines. You go over all around you, and you've got the other Israelites, so you can't go and kill them for a space. So they go on, and they come to Micah's house, okay? And they with these 5 spies, and they go up there, and they said that they recognized when they got to near the house of Micah, they recognized the voice of the Levite. Now, I don't know how that worked, because the Levite would have been had to have been loud, I guess. I don't know. But anyway, they found him, and so they go in there and says, "Hey, what are you doing here?" So they must have known this Levite beforehand. Possibly when the Levite was traveling around, looking around, he went up to Dan first, and they met these guys, and then went on, because they looked at him and says, "What are you doing here? What brought you here?" So obviously they knew him. And so he told him, what it was that he had gone. Micah had done this for him, and so he hired me, and so here I am. I became his priest. So he describes himself as a he describes himself as a hireling, basically. And so they said, "Oh, okay, so you're a priest. Inquire. We want to know." And of course, by this time, he had this ephod, and like the high priest in Shiloh would have had, and so they were kind of used. They were going to use him as an oracle to get, okay, what do we do? Are we going to be successful? So, and he said, "Please inquire of God." They said to him, "So we may know whether our way that we are going to be successful." "Go in peace," he said. The way that you're going has Adonai's approval. So, we really don't know how in the world these guys knew him, but that was my idea, that, okay, this priest had kind of wound his way through Dan, and he had known these guys a little bit. And so then they see him again up here in the highlands of Ephraim. They ask him for a sign, and of course the hireling priest gives them what they want to hear, because, if you're a hireling, you don't get paid to tell people, contradictory things. You got to tell them what you want, what they want to hear. And, so it goes back. We see that in government today, the yes man, the swamp, whatever you want to call it, that you don't make waves, and you certainly don't tell your boss that, "Hey, I think you're wrong. I think you need to do this." So the boss says something, you say, "Yes, sir, that sounds like a great idea." And that's just the way things go. And also they did it 3,500 years ago. So, all right. So he described himself as just a hireling, and rather than a consecrated priest. All right. So the 5 men left. They went on up to Laish, and there they saw the people living securely, like the Zidonians, or people from Sidon on the coast, and they were tranquil, unsuspecting. They were just ripe for the pickings, something that these guys from Dan could handle, because they sure hadn't handled anything else in 250 years of living there. The Zidonians, they didn't have people from Laish. They didn't have any mutual defense treaties with anybody. So they didn't really have any walls up or anything. It was kind of an idyllic place. And so when they came back to their kinsmen at Zor and Eshtaol, their kinsmen asked, "Well, what do you say?" And then said, "Let's go up against them," they said, "because we have seen the land, and it is very good. We're sitting, and you guys, you're sitting still. Let's go. Let's go and enter and possess the land." And when you get there, you're going to get right onto some unsuspecting people, and then it'll be easy peasy. We can go in there, and that'll be great land. God has certainly given us that land, and we're it's going to be just great. And so with that, this Laish is way up in the northeast corner of Israel. It's in what they call now the Golan Heights, and they really didn't have any military alliances. Now it's known as Tel Dan today, or it's Tel meaning the ruins of, or whatever. Dan. It's the city of Dan, and this. And in fact, here's a map of it. I put this map up here, right up here. Here's the Sea of Galilee. down here, and there's Dan up there. And I think I've got some I got some pictures on it later on, right at the end. Okay, so the Danite clan from Zora and Eshtaol, 600 men. These are the soldiers and so forth. So really, this is a pretty small group when you consider. But they went up and they camped out at this Kiriath Jearim in Judah. Therefore, they call that place Mahane Dan, which is the campment, the camp of Dan. And this Kiriath Jearim is called the town of forests. And from there, they passed on to the hill country of Ephraim, and they came to Micah's house. So Micah's that is the place to be in the central highlands there of Ephraim. And so they go there, and these spies then tell the people, says, hey, you know what? When we were there, these guys, they had an ephod, they had a big idol, they had a carved image, and a whole bunch of household gods. In other words, they had a lot of wealth in this thing, because this silver idol would have been very expensive. And instead of saying, well, let's go and inquire of the priest an oracle as to if it sounds good, they just say, well, now you know what you got to do. You consider what you have to do. And that kind of, in a way, that is hinting at violence, I would say. And so that's just what kind of setting it up for these guys to do something. And sure enough, they went aside, and then they came to this house of, they said that the young Levite and that's the strange thing. They said the house of the young Levite. So did the young Levite now kind of have an ascendancy up into the household? Because it says the house of the young Levite at Micah's house. And so they asked him, well, how you doing there, priest? And didn't inquire, they just asked him about how he was doing and so forth. And but at the same time, there's 600 soldiers right outside the gates of this compound where they were living, I suppose. And so the 5 men, the spies, they're continuing on with their spying. They go into the house of Micah, and they grab the carved image, the ephod, the household idols, the molten image, while the priest was standing at the entrance of the gate with 600 armed men armed with weapons of war. All right, so this appears that the Levite, had his own place in this compound of Micah. Maybe how a gated community, perhaps, with his family inside of the extended family and all that. Who knows? But the spies, they went in and they took the carved image, the ephod, the household gods, and the molten image, the silver thing. That was the big deal. And it said that the priest, though, he was out at the front gate with kind of, I don't know, staring down or just doing whatever he was doing with the 600 men outside the gate. So he didn't seem to be a party to it. Now, and going on, I'm running late. Now, after these had gone into Michael's house and taken the image, the ephod, the household idols, and the molten image, the priest said, hey, what are you doing? And they said, be quiet and put your hand on your mouth and shut up, is what they're saying. And go with us, and you can be our father and priest. Wouldn't it be better to be the father and the priest of a clan rather than just one guy in this house? And so it said, the priest's heart, yeah, buddy, that's great. It said, made his heart glad. And he took the ephod and the household items and the carved image, and he said, okay, let's go. Didn't take a lot of convincing for him, because he had just been promoted from a household priest to a nation priest. And so they turned and set off, and with the little ones and the cattle and goods in front of them. Okay, so here the priest accepted this deal, and they're on their way. And so here is a map of where they started. Here's Dan down here, this little spot down in here. Okay, you just see right there. And they go from here right along to right into Benjamin and maybe just north of Jerusalem, and then they take this road. It's a well-established road, goes right up here. This would have been some possibly some of the same road that Yeshua would have traveled, and going from Galilee back down to Jerusalem, and they go beside the city, the Sea of Galilee, and then get on up to Laish, or Dan, as it they renamed it Dan. Okay, so when they were a good distance from Micah's house, the men that were in the houses near Micah's house gathered and caught up with the children of Dan. They called out to the children of Dan, who turned theand their faces around, and said to Micah, "What's the matter with you? What are you that you have called these guys out with you? What's wrong with you? What's going on?" And Micah goes, he said, "Well, you've taken away my gods which I made, and the priest, and walked away. What do I have left? And how do you say to me, what's the matter with you? What do you think I'm saying? What do you think is wrong?" Children of Dan said, "Hey, don't let your voice be heard among us, because there's probably some dangerous guys here that you could lose your life with the lives of your household." They're not going to take any responsibility themselves, but those dangerous guys in the tribe of Dan, they might not take too kindly to you coming up here and fussing it. So Micah looked around. He says, "Okay, I've got me and my 3 or 4 neighbors, and they got 600 men, and they're all outfitted for war." Okay. And so he turned around and went home. Well, then what happened? Then said the children of Dan went on their way, and when Micah saw that they were too strong, they took what Micah had made and the priest, and came to Laish, a tranquil and unsuspecting people, and they struck them with the edge of the sword, and they burned the town with fire. There was no deliverer, no one to come to their aid, because it was far from Sidon, and they had no alliance with anyone. It was in the valley near Beth Rehob, and then they rebuilt the town and lived in it. All right, so like I said, Micah turned tail, and he went home. The people of Dan pounced down on these people of Laish, the Zidonians they called them, and destroyed them. But they were part of the Canaanite people, and they were just 250 years late in getting rid of them. So then they rebuilt the town, and then they called the town Dan, and after the tribal name, and just wipe out any memory or any reference to Laish. And they set up for themselves the carved image, Jonathan, son of Gershom, son of Manasseh. Okay, now this Manasseh, what they did was they misspelled the word Moshe and made it into Manasseh, because they didn't want to disparage the name of Moshe here. And he and his sons were priests to the tribe of Dan until the day of the exile from the land. So they set them up, Micah's carved image that he had made, all the time that the house of God was in Shiloh. Okay. All right. So Laish, today known as Dan, Tel Dan, because there's really no city around there. I mean, I was up there, and it's all just forest and stuff around it. There's no other real town or village right there on it, because like in a lot of these ruins, they have a city that's kind of grown up right around them. And Nablus is an example. Well, Jerusalem is an example where the ruins, they just built on top of the ruins. Well, they didn't do that with Dan. The ruins are still very visible today, and they've kind of excavated a bunch of it. But now we finally find the name of the Levite. His name is Jonathan, and it says that his sons then served until the Assyrian exile. So that would have been right. Okay, this happened around 1100 BCE, and the Babylonian exile was 770, something like that. Or not the Babylonian, the Assyrian exile, because the Babylonian exile was 586 BCE. But they served for a couple, 300 years then up there in Dan as the priest of Dan, okay? And said the idol then, it said the son served until the Assyrian exile. The idol they stayed there until the Babylonian exile. So interesting that they could keep the idol another 100 years after the priests had quit serving there. All right, now here's the picture of the temple. Now this was not what. Okay, this temple was actually set up by Jeroboam after the split up of Israel, where they had the northern kingdom and southern kingdom after Solomon. So they set this up, and their temple was back over here onto the right here, as you can see that. And then this area here was for their altar. Now, and you can see this little part right here. This okay, see this metal framework here? That is just an outline or representation of where and how big and everything the altar would have been that they had to burn sacrifices on. And so if you'll see this little spot right here, that was for the original. That's where Jonathan set up his temple, and that, or his altar. And so that's still visible today, this area right here. In fact, there you can see it.